Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. This is Jake along with Scott, and today we're talking cocktails. And you probably think we're going to a bar, we're going to get a nice glass, we're going to get our shot glass, we're going to mix it all up and learn some fancy things. Wrong. If you know anything about Scott and I, we like to keep things simple around here. And so today we're joined by Robert Haynes, co-founder of Sunday's Finest. If you haven't heard of it, you need to look them up because they are bringing an elevated RTD to the people. And if you've had an RTD, you may have had some bad experiences, you may have had some good ones, but this one, I promise you, could be good, but it does carry a little bit of price tag, just fair warning, because it's got expensive, nice, exquisite 15-year-old Kentucky bourbon in it. So just a little precursor, so I'll let you all know. So Robbie, thanks for joining the Bourbon Lens tonight.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man,
nice to see y'all.
we're excited to have you on. The package arrived like kind of discreetly, and I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Well, what do we have coming up?" And I opened it up. I was like, "Oh, this is the cocktail that we talked about back in August." So I'm glad that the blend came together nicely for you all over the last few months, and the package is ready to drop to the people.
Yeah, it's been an epic journey to get to this point. You know, we launched Sunday's Finest last year around the same time and have been working diligently since then to gear up for this year's release. So it feels pretty cool to be finally getting this out there to folks.
Yeah, so I know we dove right into the deep end, but we'll take a few like 5, 6 7 steps back. So, you know, when you think about bourbon and whiskey, right, people probably think about straight bourbon, straight whiskey. They think of their Jim Beams, their Heaven Hills of the world, what have you. And, you know, what has continued to grow is the cocktail game, right? So as you all think about developing this brand, Sunday's Finest, what made you all think about, you know, developing an RTD versus like releasing these barrels that you all have as straight whiskey?
So my background is cocktails and hospitality. I moved to Chicago when I was just a hair over 20, got a job as a valet and was running around in the cold. And a friend of mine had recently started working as a barback. And one night he was like, "Man, what are you doing? You got to come inside." And that kind of started a small like chain reaction, if you will, that eventually put me behind the bar at a really great, iconic Chicago cocktail bar called the Violet Hour. And that's where I was first introduced to cocktails, great spirits. And that's kind of like the first probably step on the path that would eventually lead us to the Gold Fashioned. The first real cocktail I ever had there, you know, I had barbacked for a couple months. No one had given me a drink. And then one night at the end of a shift, the bar manager said, "Hey man, do you want a cocktail?" And I had seen these drinks go out across the room for a while now. And, you know, I had been drinking at college bars before. I had drank, but the first real cocktail I had, someone made me a whiskey smash and it blew my top off. It was like the best thing I'd ever had at that point. And that kind of lit a spark for me. And I got really into cocktails and really found a lot of joy in kind of like the creative process, crafting cocktails, you know, trying to create a drink that not only tasted great, but could also maybe tell a story or had some sort of like narrative arc to it. And, you know, shortly, you know, I spent a number of years there, you know, and at some point I got really interested in the production side. I felt like that was kind of like the next step for me to kind of start crafting things, and started out actually in the liqueur space. So really focused on making interesting liqueurs under the Apolog brand for, you know, bartenders to create, you know, new and interesting riffs on classic cocktails. And life was good. We were jamming, very busy, but again, very focused on premise and the ready to drink, ready to enjoy segment. Had not really crossed our minds until 2020, when just like that, bars got dark real quick, and started to think about, creatively, like, what are some interesting things, compelling things that we can do that we would feel good about, that we thought we could do a really good job with, in the ready to enjoy space. And there was no shortage of people, doing canned margaritas, seltzers, kind of like refreshing, fun, casual, ready to enjoy cocktails. Some of them not so good, some of them okay. But I think we saw an opportunity at the kind of the upper tiers of the segment, which was growing, to do something that was really special. Our goal is to create the absolute best possible ready to enjoy cocktail and package it in a way that would create like the most hospitable, considered consumer experience. And that was the birth of Sunday's Finest.
So what I will tell you is, from a consumer standpoint, my favorite part about the packaging and everything, it's not the little spritzer, it's not the bottle, it's actually the topper that you put on the bottle to be able to pour the alcohol into, your shot glass or your jigger, right? Like that was my favorite thing. Like, it's just like a subtle thing, and I didn't think it would make a big difference, but like pouring it into the jigger to like measure it out, to like focus on developing the cocktail the way it's supposed to be developed based upon like the rules you all kind of write out to follow. Like, that little nuance I kind of knew was upper echelon when I pulled the top off and saw that. Like, Scott, I don't know about you, but you talked about the packaging a little bit prior to the podcast, but what are your thoughts about just the packaging and making it that upper echelon type of RTD?
To hear that it was born out of the pandemic is definitely, it makes sense now, because I know that when bars were closed down or partially closed down, and restaurants were partially closed down, they could start to, send people home with to-go cocktails and things like that. So, and they were generally just overloaded with sugar and didn't taste real good, like you were saying. So it just makes sense. And then to be able to package it in a way that, when you take it off the bar and you open it, it just feels like you're at a really nice restaurant, and you can make it yourself. I went and got some Kentucky Straight Ice, nice little plug there for our friend Rich, but stopped by the liquor store, got a pack of clear ice, poured it in a glass, came upstairs, set up this podcast, and just poured it into the glass. And it's obviously a time saver, one, but it's just an experience of opening the package, using the atomizer. It's like the whole package, and admittedly it's expensive, but thinking about what it is and how many cocktails you can actually make with this. I mean, for a party, if you busted this out, I mean, people were like, what the hell is that? That's just kind of what I was thinking, like, buy it for a nice party, break it out, and everybody's got, ready, and you're not slaving over making cocktails, peeling, oranges and, stuff like that. So
it's a conversation starter for sure. And you're getting, 10 to 12 cocktails per bottle made with stellar whiskey. And, the cocktail is, been fine-tuned by yours truly. We made 3,000 bottles worth, but the process, once the individual components were dialed in, like, we spent a lot of time on the whiskey blend, a lot of time on the bitters, but then in actually making the cocktail, it wasn't too different from how I would make a cocktail for either of you if you sat down at the bar. I took my time, blended it up, tasted it, spent some time thinking about it. Like, okay, what can I do to nudge this into the center? What is the one little move I can make to make this cocktail really kick ass? And, if this was a single serving cocktail, it would have been, okay, cool. It needs another, 16th an ounce of whiskey and a dash of bitters. In this instance, it's, it needs another 10 gallons of whiskey and, 2 buckets of bitters, but
just a proportion thing.
Yeah. But the process is the same. And I definitely, on the packaging, I wanted it to feel like, if you go to like a great bar, there's like, the experience kind of starts outside. You kind of come in the entryway, maybe there's an interaction with a host, or maybe there's a hallway, and then you turn around and then you have like the big reveal, and wanted to kind of telegraph that experience into the box. So you have like kind of the double gatefold that opens up. You don't see the bottle immediately when you open it.
It's very Gatsby style.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that like Art Deco extravagance. And it is a decadent, luxurious product, but I think it's something you could bring to like you were saying, you bring this to a nice dinner, a Friendsgiving or a holiday party with, family or friends. And now everyone's going to have a world-class cocktail. Y'all got something to talk about. And I think it can make for a really like magical evening.
Yeah. That was, what the crazy thing is though, like about that, if you think about going out and like, let's say like, hey, we got 12 people and we're all hanging out and we're all like, we're doing old fashions, like just to get the night started. Right. Like it was $15 at the hotel bar. Like, so like, you're not far off, right? Like if you think about like that, like from people joining in, like getting the experience together and saying, hey, we got 10 guys, we're going to do around old fashions. Well, shit, that's 15 times 10. Like money adds up quick.
Yeah. And you got to get there. You got to Uber back. Yeah. There's a lot of other like kind of unspoken costs and just going out. Not to mention that, 10 old fashions, sure, a great bartender is going to knock those out, but it's going to take a minute.
Yeah.
Too.
And you got a tip and all the other things. So like, we've hit on the price and that is what it is. Like we're just going to let that one just, because what I want to talk about is people can't see you, but I can, and you're a little bit of a musician I see. And like, what is that? Like, I feel like bartenders and like artsy, creative types, like that just kind of happens. Like it's like those types of things come in because there's a lot of riffs that can happen on a cocktail and creation. So like, how do you feel like that blend of music and whiskey kind of play together in crafting this RTD?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels between working in the arts, specifically in music, and in making cocktails. I've spent the better part of a decade working with bands and artists in the studio, mixing records, and making a cocktail is not so different. Making a cocktail menu, a thoughtful, considered cocktail menu is a lot like making a record. Every drink kind of should speak to the other cocktails, and together, they form a kind of a greater whole in the way that like, a good collection of songs makes an album. And on like the individual cocktail side, just like with audio, you're looking for like a pleasing balance of frequencies across like the whole spectrum. When you're, tuning a cocktail or tasting and adjusting a drink, you're really doing the same thing. And, instead of adding a little more, low end, or, maybe you're adding, it's a little more like Demerara, or if your cocktail needs a little more citrus or a bright note, that's like turning up the high end on the EQ. And so I think that's what kind of I connected with in cocktails originally. And then I think there's also like a practicality to like, if you're if you're a musician in a city and you're looking for a job that has some flexibility around being able to take a night off here or there, you're going to find yourself, probably working the floor somewhere or behind the bar. And one thing kind of leads to another. I did not expect to be bartending long. For me, I thought it was going to be I was going to do it for 6 or 8 months. But I really liked it. I loved meeting people. I loved talking to people. And I really liked being able to have these like heady guest interactions where you're, asking someone 3 to 5 questions and trying to discern like what do you think, what is going to be like the absolute perfect cocktail for them? Because it's not the same for everyone. And, you might even make the same cocktail 2 different ways. If someone orders an old fashioned and I know that they have a sweet tooth, and if the next person next to them I know likes things like bone dry, they might order the same drink, but I'm going to, tailor it to them. So I got really into that aspect of, in real life bartending. And with the gold fashioned, for me, is more like, probably the equivalent of like making an album or something, where you're like taking all of these little pieces and finding the perfect whiskeys and like sourcing all these ingredients for the bitters and then putting them together just the right way and then packaging them up and releasing it.
I think that's super, super interesting. And Scott, like, I know you came off mute, you were about to say something. So I hope we're going in the same direction around ingredients, but we may not be.
That's what I was going to look at was the ingredient list, because, an old fashioned, right? It's ice, whiskey, bitters, sugar, and then, your orange or your citrus or, whatever that element is. But this is like, it's not just any whiskey, and it's not just any sugar, and it's not just any bitters. So let's go through the list here, because when I was looking at it I got to tell you, I didn't do a lot of prep for this, and I'm glad I really didn't, because just kind of discovering it as I'm sitting here drinking it is probably even better than knowing everything I needed to know and then just taking a drink. So
yeah.
So I'm glad that Scott and I were on the same wavelength here, because like that's where I was going. Like just listening to you was like those album components, right? Like how the songs go in order, like how are those things like make up the melodic sound of an album, right? Like it's placed in an order for a reason. And we like in our pre-conversation, like we touched on the saffron piece of it, but like I like Scott's idea, like going down by the ingredients. And let's hit on the whiskey part last, because, I think for the most part, people would like want to hone in there. Let's hone in on the other parts of the actual like cocktail, because that's what changes the flavors and complexities that people are going to get.
Yeah. So totally right. Like classic old fashioned whiskey, bitters, sugar, water, water, in the form of stirring, or water in the form of ice, but a pretty like minimalist recipe. But if you take each one of those elements on its own, each one presents like unique opportunities to enhance it or elevate it and tell a story or give the cocktail some personality. So starting with the bitters, your classic old fashioned is always, typically going to have Angostura bitters and or, some orange bitters. I love Angostura, and I love, Regan's orange, I think is, fantastic. And I would never try to make an aromatic bitters that was like Angostura. I don't know. It just feels like it would be like a fool's errand. But, for the gold fashioned, we were kind of really locked into this idea of finding legitimately what we feel to be the world's most like exquisite ingredients. And so we sourced the world's best spices and herbs from the 6 inhabitable continents. We went pretty wide with it. We found saffron from Afghanistan, from Herat. There's a Chicago-based B corporation. We are also a B Corp called Rumi Spice, and they're vertically integrated, and they have a saffron farm in Herat, Afghanistan, and they're the largest employer of women in the region.
Were they on Shark Tank by chance?
They were.
Okay, because me and you talked about this, but I was like, man, me and my wife are going through watching like all the episodes from Shark Tank from like the beginning to the end. So we're in our season 10 now, but like I remember telling you, I'm like, I just heard Saffron on Shark Tank, and then now you said the name. I'm like, they were on Shark Tank. So this it all makes sense, because like in August, like literally it was like the night before Robbie and I talked, like I watched that episode where they pitched their saffron to the Sharks. So sorry for the random tangent, everyone that's listening, but you all need to know that.
Super fan.
Hey, amen, brother.
Big fan of Shark Tank. So saffron from Afghanistan, world's most expensive spice. Their saffron's amazing. We have used it in the past with apolog and a saffron liqueur. And so that was on our radar. And that was kind of like the impetus for the name, originally like the gold fashioned. the saffron gives it a very subtle, like gold hue once it hits the ice. Rounding it out, we have, we worked with a spice merchant out of Chicago called Rare Tea Cellars. It's run by a guy named Rod Marcus. And we wanted to get grade A Tahitian vanilla beans. He was able to find us some that I swear are like fatter than your finger and, 12 inches long. They're unreal.
I've never seen a vanilla bean like skinnier than like a pencil.
Yeah, the vanilla bean market is tough these days, but he had the plug on the good stuff. And rounding that out, we have some single origin Ecuadorian or single estate Ecuadorian cacao that gives it kind of some deeper, darker, earthy notes. We were able to find Seville orange peel from Seville, Spain. So like true bitter orange. Bitters, we knew we needed a bittering agent, and gentian is probably my favorite, and it just has a really nice like woody bitterness on its own, and it's kind of subtly floral. And we were able to find wild harvested gentian from the French Alps. So, the bitters themselves on their own are really out of this world.
I gotta ask, what is gentian? Is that like a root?
Yeah, it's the root of a flower, and so it's a little purple flower, but it's got a bitter root, and people dry it, and it's been used in medicine for centuries, like to soothe an upset stomach. And then you see it in kind of most of your classic Amaro and digestives.
Okay.
You also see it in fancy cooking shows like Beat Bobby Flay on Food Network.
I thought Bobby Flay was like no, I'm just kidding. No,
so
I was gonna say he's like a super traditional. I never knew that he might have used gentian root. But
Bobby tries to beat all the chefs in the world, and sometimes he loses, and they use some weird things. And gentian was on one of the episodes of Beat Bobby Flay. I watch a lot of Food Network in my free time too. So between Shark Tank and Food Network, that's why I'm always hungry, because there's a lot of food pitched on Shark Tank, and Food Network just makes me hungry.
I think out of that list, I know we're still going through the ingredients, but out of that list, I don't know what saffron tastes like. I'm not going to pretend that I do.
Have you ever had paella?
No, maybe. I don't know. But
oh my gosh!
Out of that list, the things that stood out to me after tasting the cocktail, it's definitely the dark chocolate, earthy chocolate, and vanilla notes. Like those are just like the fragrant vanilla, and then that earthy, deep, dark chocolate is what stood out to me out of that list. It could be the saffron, it could be the gentian root, but to me, that's what really stands out, out of the glass.
Yeah, the saffron is like the exotic, can't quite put your finger on it, subtly floral thing that happens. And so the bitters making process also pretty cool. All those ingredients are then macerated in 90 proof non-GMO grain neutral spirit. So basically we use alcohol to extract everything that's really cool, interesting about those botanicals, and strain it, filter it, and you have this like really intense flavorful liquid spice that you can then dash into your cocktail.
Our friend Bob with Al and Well Bitters would appreciate that, because I know that he's big on using bitters. Alcohol to make the bitters rather than a bunch of other ingredients. So
yeah.
Well,
just to like speak on like the flavor profile, I think for me, like what I really liked was the ability to change the aromatics like through the orange and getting like the flavor profile. So like I tried it with just one spritz, and then I did like 2 or 3 because I'm a nut. But like the balance of that with the whiskey components give you a lot of like it's a drying effect almost. Like I think it's a subtly sweet old fashioned. It's not a like puckery old fashioned, like where they're pouring a ton of simple syrup in there. Or they're using like 2 sugar cubes. It's a very subtly sweet, more of a drying. And I think that balances out your whiskey components that we've not talked about yet. But like, that's what I really liked, was how balanced it was from a like dry, sweet, like, cause it hit all parts of your palate. And that's how you want to enjoy a cocktail. It's not just up front. It's not just in the back. It wasn't medicinal. It was fragrant and flavorful throughout the drinking experience, which was nice. And as the ice melted and like watered down some of the components, it brought out more flavors and aromatics, which I thought was nice.
Thank you. So like, you got the bitters. The Demerara is really key, right? Like a good old fashioned should not be sweet. You do not want to lose. Like, I feel like the most, like a really good old fashioned should put the spirit itself like on a pedestal, and showcase it in the best possible light. So I would say it is gently sweetened with Demerara sugar. The thinking is that like, you have this whiskey that has spent all these years in a barrel, and the last thing you want to do, is fuck that up, right? Like it's sacred. Like good whiskey is so hard to source and come by, and like so much just time goes into that. So like, I feel like with all the other components, the bitters are there to add a little bit of character, but not step on what's happening with the spirit. And the Demerara is there to just give it a little bit of body in the mouth and help carry those other flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that when I make the occasional old fashioned at the house, it's always, it's enjoyable, but typically it's either really booze heavy or it's too sweet.
Yeah.
So I think that like the Demerara sugar, that really helps, like you said, carry everything else. It adds a body to it that helps distribute everything across the palate, which, I mean, not that I'm going out and making Demerara simple syrup or anything like that when I'm making a simple old fashioned on a Tuesday evening or something like that. But
no, but you can pour some gold fashioned now, Scott.
Maybe I need to. Yeah.
Like as like he was saying, like I don't like carrying cocktail crap at my house. Like I have bitters, that's great, all fine and well, but like I don't want to make a cocktail. So like if I want a cocktail, like I want it to be good. And like I don't think I make a good cocktail. 1, because I don't practice. 2, like I don't want to keep oranges and all the other crap at my house. So like there's just a lot of issues working against it for me to or make my own simple syrup, right? So like this to me is like, hey, I could have this. Like I could pour an old fashioned, because sometimes like a straight pour whiskey is just not what I want, right? Like sometimes you need a cocktail, and so like the elevated experience sits in kind of that wheelhouse, right? Like of hey, I'm not like cheating myself. I'm still drinking good whiskey, but like I'm also like getting a steakhouse restaurant cocktail. Like that's what I want to compare it to, because that's the type of level of money I think I'm paying for.
Yep. I could count on, honestly, I could count on one hand the number of cocktails I've made at home in the last, it's probably 2 years. It's just not something I do at home. And for the same reasons, like, I probably like more than capable of whipping something up with whatever's laying around, but, just something different at home. Like, I'll have, historically would have some whiskey on the rocks, maybe a glass of wine, sometimes a beer, but, I hear you. But like now that I have this, I'm like, oh, cool. It's like Sunday. Like maybe I'll have a cocktail and we can watch like Game of Thrones or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, I feel like it's unlocked another level of at-home enjoyment, even for me.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't want to skip out on is this is a ready-made cocktail that actually has a nice proof point too, because I've bought some ready-made cocktails and things like that, or went to a movie theater and they have those ready-made cocktails that you just pour over ice and go and watch the movie. But they're always just like 30% alcohol, like 60 proof or like 50 proof or something like that. So you add it to ice and it's immediately watered down.
Yeah, it's toast.
It's like a drink of beer.
It's what, 85 proof?
84.4. There's no, so I know we'll get into the whiskey blend, but all the inputs, like the bitters are 90 proof. Our vintage whiskey blend, we proof down to 90. The Demerara syrup has no proof. But we didn't add any water beyond that, simply because one, you don't know what kind of ice people have. Some people might have a nice chunk of ice. Some people might have, just a tray of ice, and those are all going to dilute at different rates. And like you said, the last thing, we would want is someone to, pour this and 2 sips later, have a watered down cocktail. Also, I feel like since so much of the emphasis is on the spirit, I want that first sip that someone has to be a little hot. I want them to taste the whiskey. I want them to know that this is a spirit forward sipper, and then it'll dilute. And then you have some, you can spend some time with your drink. You can sip on this for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And it has a really nice arc where it starts out a little hot and then it slowly comes into focus. And then you had mentioned earlier, once it gets, once the ice gets dilutes and a little more water content gets added, other things kind of start to pop out, and it kind of becomes like almost a different, interesting drinking experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. It turns into, when you first pour it in the glass, it is proof forward, but it's darker, richer notes. And now that it's set in the glass for a little while and the ice is, Kentucky straight ice, another little plug. This is the second time I've poured on top of this, and I've still got a nice big rock in there, but it's bright now. So all the orange oils are really coming out.
Yeah. To be honest, my favorite thing about it was the moment I drank it, I got and I'm going into the whiskey just so everyone is duly noted. We've given everything else to the components. Let's talk about the whiskey. The one thing that I liked about it was from the moment I drank it, I got the deep dark notes of 15-year-old Kentucky bourbon, oak, wood, tannin, but then the rye spice comes right behind it and balances that out. And I know there's a I think 9-year-old, I don't have it in front of me, a 9-year-old bourbon in between that, really nice bright bodied 6-year-old rye whiskey, right? It's not this 2-year-old rye, it's a bodied rye whiskey. So it the spices balance out so nice because you have the oak tannin, and then you flip it to the citrus and the orange and the pininess of that rye kind of shine through on the backside. And I think that's what balanced out the whiskey and the cocktail for me, was the evolution of, hey, I got this huge arc of the deep, dark, complex notes and the middleness of the 9-year, and then the 6-year rye just kind of gave me the spice at the end that I wanted and needed.
Yeah, I love the split base cocktail is always something that I've enjoyed. There's a classic called a Vucare. It's a old New Orleans cocktail, but it's typically made with rye whiskey and cognac. And that kind of got my gears turning a while ago. With that cocktail in particular, you kind of get the best of both worlds. As just a rye drink, the Vucare is okay, and it's just a cognac drink, it's okay-ish, but together it's kind of complex and you see that in tiki cocktails too. There's a saying that 2 rums can do what 1 rum cannot, and you see a lot of tiki drinks where they'll blend a light rum and a dark rum, or spiced rum and a non-spiced rum to create a more complex spirit base. And thought with this cocktail, that was we talk about elevating each individual component, and for the spirit space, the first year, last year when we launched, we had a 8-year bourbon and a 5-year rye, and it was a real nice yin yang. We were in the fortunate position to be able to set aside half of those bourbon barrels and half of those rye barrels and let them age for another year. So we were able to level up that 5-year rye to 6 years and that 8-year bourbon to 9. We knew we wanted to add something else to this year's blend to kind of take it over the top, and searching, and we were able to source some 15-year bourbon that was lights out, and blend that with the other barrels to create this like really interesting and complex vintage whiskey blend that on its own was really, really great. We set aside a few bottles. I don't know what's going to happen to those.
I know where one can go.
I think there's 4.
Call that R&D, right?
Yeah, we call that research.
But yeah, the whiskey blend is like, I think I don't know. For me, it sets it off. Like you get, like you were saying, like you get this like character that only comes with age. And I'm sure there are like people have tried all sorts of like newfangled ways to make younger whiskeys taste older. And I'm sure someone's going to crack that code at some point, but I
ain't happened yet.
It. Nah. And so, yeah, you get this kind of like stately 15-year bourbon. I feel like the 9-year bourbon kind of like quarterbacks it with like some nice body. And then the rye, I feel like makes it stand up, makes it feel a little more assertive. And yeah, and together, like, yeah, all three kind of do this really cool thing. Like I'm sure it would be a great cocktail with any one of those on its own. But I don't think it would be as remarkable if they weren't blended.
It's very interesting, like what you said about like split base cocktail, or split base. What was the term? Split base technique.
Split base, yeah.
It's like having a rye or a bourbon house blend is really what it is. I've seen a lot of like cocktail bars where they're like, oh yeah, we've got our 9-year single barrel and we're gonna make that into the cocktail. So that's their house whiskey, even though you're like, you're crazy for using a 9-year bourbon for a house whiskey. But it really makes sense if you can tweak that element so intently, and then you build off of that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I know like Jake's in Wisconsin currently, and one of my neighbors, he's also from Wisconsin, and he likes cocktails. But when he drinks old fashions, they're made with brandy.
Yep.
Which is just odd to me, but it really does, just to think like, could you mix like a brandy rye old fashioned?
It would probably be better. It would certainly be better than a straight up brandy old fashioned.
Guarantee it. Guarantee.
I'm in Wisconsin right now, and everyone would like stab everyone on this podcast.
That might be what's wrong with your old fashioned when you ordered that. It might be a brandied old fashioned.
No, they used Maker's Mark. They unfortunately used way too much cherries, and it tasted like Robitussin.
Oh. Yeah, but the split base. I mean, I think
we've all been there.
Like if you ran a cocktail bar right now, like, and you're like, oh well, I'm gonna have my house whiskey. It would be this 9, 15, and 6-year, bourbon, and then 6-year rye. I think that's very creative.
Would love to do that. Unfortunately, we used all of our whiskey in this year's blend. So next year, we are already starting to think about like what kind of compelling whiskey with a story can we source for the 2023 blend.
Yeah.
So gears are turning.
And that's where I had my mind at, was like, Well, you've riffed the old fashioned twice. Where's the next version? Like, is there a Manhattan, or is there a Negroni, or is there, something else that would be your traditional whiskey type of cocktails that people are a Boulevardier, not a Negroni. Sorry, that's a gin cocktail. Like a Boulevardier. Like, where's the next, traditional whiskey cocktail that you all might be thinking about? Or is it like, hey, old fashioned maybe like the most ordered drink in the bar, and like, hey, that would be mass appeal. Like, where's your all's heads at with that? Like, because you think about your album, right? You can't just can't be a one hit wonder.
No. So the gold fashioned, for all intents and purposes, will continue to be an annual allocated. I guess allocated is another word. Annual limited release. We'll continue to hunt and source for like awesome spirits for the base, and I think that will continue to be in like the 3,000 to 5,000 bottles a year range. Next year we do intend to release one or two, call them like more evergreen offerings. They will be spirit forward. We are working on a gin cocktail and a whiskey cocktail, and we have been in talks with a couple of with a vermouth maestro wizard. We've found a guy that is just making killer vermouths. So if we can dial in a really, really lovely vermouth blend, we'll see where that takes us. I do think those offerings will be a little more not everyday price point, but they will not be $150 a bottle like the gold fashioned, and they will be available year round. And I do think like the atomizer zest, great cocktail, engages all the senses. And when we looked at what was happening in the ready to enjoy space, felt like that was the one thing that no one was really touching, was like this idea of engaging like all the senses, specifically aroma. And I think that is something that we'll continue to do through all of our offerings, is incorporate the atomizer zest. So people are getting a total sensory experience with their Sunday's finest cocktails.
Yeah, I mean, because that's generally the missing element, right? When you're making a cocktail, you're missing that fresh burst of fragrance. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to make a cocktail, but I don't have any fresh fruit.
Yeah.
So
when we were doing R&D on the first year's blend, like we had found some whiskey. We had an early iteration of the bitters, and we made drinks, and we were talking about them amongst the group. And again, like our goal is like, this has to be as good or better than like the best craft cocktail bar in your town. And we tasted it, and someone said like, hey, what do you think? I think this is good. And it's like, no, like until if it had an orange, if someone had a fresh citrus zest, like it would be, but like until we can unlock that, it's not. And one of our partners, Adam, kind of like off the cuff was like, what if we had orange zest in a little spray bottle? And I think we kind of like chuckled for a second, and then we all got real quiet, and we were like, what if?
Mm-hmm.
And we found a producer in Burlington, Vermont called Alice and the Magician, and they specialize in aromatic zests. Whoa. And we hit them up, and we were like, hey, like we want to do this, like can you help us? And they're like, we got you, like this is what we do. So the orange zest is a blend of navel orange, blood orange, and Valencia orange.
Nice.
And yeah, they knocked it out of the park.
I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it's just a nice touch at the end.
Oh yeah, like it's kind of like one of those things. It takes it over the top. It just it makes a classic cocktail that much better. And I think that's the thing, like, I want everyone to understand about this. Like, it's just the little nuances that makes it that much better. Because you can buy your cocktail, like your RTDs, and there's some really good ones out there. But like, if you want something elevated and you want something a little bit like just to make you feel like you're at that bar and you when you're grilling up your steaks and like, you know, like you're making like this big to do, like this is it. Like you don't just pull out, you know, your favorite bottle of whiskey for your favorite Sunday, but this is Sunday's finest, right? Like you got your white linens on, you're yelling crab cakes and football, and you're enjoying life. Like this is what this is about.
That's it.
I mean, does it get any much better than that? Scott, how many of you drank
really.
so far?
What's that?
How many of you drank so far?
Just the two. And then I just poured a neat pour over the remaining ice, which is something I do at restaurants whenever there's like a little bit of ice left. I'm like, oh, just give me a neat pour, and then I'll dump that on there, and then get all the elements just barely. But
yeah, there's a good name for that ice, and I forgot that someone used to have, and they called it like, wasn't like seasoned ice.
that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I can't waste this, you know, this perfectly good ice. It literally looks like a mountain right now because how it's melted. But so yeah, I had 2 pours over this single cube of ice, and it's still a nice solid chunk. So
yeah,
testament to good ice as well. So if you're gonna buy this,
get good ice.
now that it's live, and link's gonna be in the bio. But if you're gonna buy this, go and find the top quality ice wherever you're at. If you're in Kentucky straight ice, without question. I just bought I think it was a 6 or a 7 pack sleeve for like $6, so like $1 a cube, right? But if you're gonna make one of these cocktails, $1 a cube, I mean, I could go get ice out of my ice maker and it would taste okay, but it's not what I really want. So spend the money. If you're gonna get this bottle, go buy nice ice wherever you're at.
Good ice.
Yeah.
Buy nice ice. So as we, celebrate the launch, again, we're on the precipice. We're on the penultimate day, Scott. The day before. The penultimate.
Flipping out the Websters real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, last before the. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So we're the day before, as my coach would say, it's the day before. So you got to get everything right. Robbie, tell everyone where they can go find and grab a bottle so that they can enjoy the spirit throughout the holidays. Because this would be the perfect, you show up at that Christmas party, Thanksgiving party, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. If you, Festivus for the rest of us, I don't know, where can they go find out everything they need to know about Sunday's Finest and where to pick up a bottle?
One thing that's really cool about this product is you can actually order it online and it will come to your door. And folks can just go to www.sundaysfinest.com and order a bottle from your phone and have it shipped to yourself or to a friend or loved one. And yeah, just crazy that, still kind of blows my mind that we live in a world where that's possible, but it's pretty cool. So yeah, sundaysfinest.com. You can order a bottle and you'll be sipping on it this weekend.
Instagram, Twitter, same thing. Sunday's Finest.
Instagram, Sunday's Finest Cocktails. Twitter, waiting to see what happens with Twitter.
Tweet, baby.
TikTok.
Elon's got you. He's gonna put everything in chronological order.
TikTok. There's been talk of TikTok, but man, I personally am too old.
We get it.
Amen, brother. I did it for 2 months, and I was like, this is terrible.
I'm scared to look at it because I feel like I'm going to get sucked in immediately.
Yeah, don't do it. But
save yourself.
As the meme says, nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. But you and whoever is around you, because you'll be watching it 24/7. But Robbie, man, we appreciate it. When you reached out, didn't know what was going to happen. And the most important thing is you got Scott's vote of approval because, Scott was like, $150 cocktail. What? And like the fact that he's poured 2, like that's huge praise from the Bottled and Bond budget man. So
I've adjusted a little bit. I've gotten older and wiser and all that stuff. But no, I think I said it earlier. This is a bottle that you can show up and share with friends. And I think you show the value of what it is. It's not like you're going to sit here and drink. Now, you probably could, but you might be feeling it tomorrow. It's not like you're going to sit here and drink a half a bottle by yourself because, like I said, it's 85 proof.
Yeah.
Like, you'll feel it.
You can get after it for sure. But like perfect gift for the holidays. Like go check this out. I'm a firm believer because I'm really crappy at making cocktails. This would be the way I go. So, kudos to you, Robbie, and the team for putting out something that's really elevated in this space, because elevated cocktails, ready to drink or ready to enjoy, as you say, that's better terminology. I like that. Ready to enjoy are hard to come by. So, great job. And we really appreciate you joining this episode of the Bourbon Lens. And as always, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Bourbon Lens. Go check out our website. We're doing a lot of cool things, a lot of reviews, a lot of information, whiskey news, everything, all the podcast features. Go check it out. We spend a lot of time and effort on that. Also, Scott spends a lot of time on editing. So because Scott spends a lot of time on editing, go give us a like and a 5-star review in your favorite podcast listening app, and tell Scott thank you for all this great content that we get, because if it wasn't for him, there would not be a Bourbon Lens. And this is the season of Thanksgiving, so I'm thanking Scott as we do this. And as always, until next time, cheers.
Cheers.